congratulations again to our staff. As I've said before, it would attract me to run for chair of the Conservation Authorities and staff. They do great work. Okay, let's move on to other staff reports and memorandums. This is the Natural Heritage Offsetting Policy. Scott.
I just want to acknowledge for board members that the Natural Heritage Offsetting report coming before you is pretty lengthy and at times a technical report. It's taken tremendous staff time and effort by Scott Peck, our Director of Watershed Planning and Engineering and Deputy CAO, to compile it. So I did just want to recognize him for that. And I thought it just might be helpful to provide a brief overview before we get started. So the staff recommendation, I just want to say, has been very carefully considered, taking into account the consultation from the discussion paper that was put out, and it's also been informed by a review of the natural features in our watershed. The discussion paper, that was quite intensive, but I do say it was a worthwhile undertaking to recognize the complexities of offsetting and our local circumstances. I believe that staff have returned with a balanced approach where we retain our existing policy framework, but with an amendment for 2 specific exceptions to incorporate and address offsetting. So the first exception acknowledges provincial direction in the event of a ministerial MZO when the decision to offset has already been made by the minister. And the second provides for and recognizes environmental assessment projects that require the removal of natural heritage features. So the staff recommendation does take into account the comments from municipal partners, and staff, Scott will be going into that. And I do want to say they both have commitment to natural heritage protection. And they also, our recommendation supports the general public feedback we received to protect natural features in place. I think our recommendation also speaks to our strategic plan, where our mission is to lead in the conservation of our watershed. I'm sure there's going to be many thoughts and prospective board members will bring forward as you consider the staff recommendation. And Scott, I'd like to turn it over to you at this point to take members through your report and to please address any questions.
To start off, I'm just going to read the recommendation just as a starting point so we have that understood. The recommendation reads that the existing policy framework for natural heritage features as outlined in Section 3 of the HCA's Planning and Regulations Policies and Guidelines document be maintained, and that offsetting compensation be incorporated in the policy, but be limited to address issues associated with ministerial zoning orders and other provincially and municipally led environmental assessment projects. And to that end, the following policy amendment should be added to Section 3.1 General Policies, Natural Heritage of the HCA's Planning and Regulations Policies and Guidelines. Specifically, Section 3.1 subsection I would be added, and it would state, in the instance of a ministerial zoning order, MZO, being issued by the province of Ontario, or a provincially or municipally led environmental assessment that requires the removal or partial removal of a designated or regulated natural heritage feature, offsetting compensation can be utilized to provide for net gain or at a minimum, no net loss. And with that, I think I've highlighted what I want to highlight in this report, and through the chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions first.
Just to interrupt you for 1 second. Did you not declare a conflict on this one, Councillor Clark?
No, sir. This is watershed-wide. It's not specific to any subject property, is it, Lisa?
No, it's not. This would be our policy approach for HCA, not specific to any property.
So there's no conflict.
Okay, just taking. Where did you declare the conflict on then, Councillor?
140 Garner Road.
Okay, there isn't a specific item on that, but there's reference to it through this report. So it's up to you.
I'm not declaring a conflict. It's watershed-wide. It's not specific to any one property. If it was specific to any one property, then I would declare that conflict.
Okay, it's entirely up to you, as you know. So,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your advice. Some quick questions, if I may. When I'm looking at the mapping, it shows an area of natural or scientific interest in ANSI, which I think is around the Aramosa Karst. And then it shows environmentally significant areas. Can you explain the difference?
Through the chair, the mapping in the Hermosa Karst, it's really identifying where the HCA lands are. That's the green blotted area showing the feeder lands as well as the lands that we own. The black area that is there, that's kind of overlaid by the HCA lands and broader, that's the area of natural and scientific interest as identified by the province of Ontario, and that represents the physical karst features that are located within that area. As you'll know, Councillor Clark, a lot of that area has, within that, I'll say, black area, has already been developed with subdivisions.
Yes.
We still regulate those areas, and we're looking at that, but that's what that area is. I don't see any environmentally significant designated land within that, save and except the ANSI feature.
Yeah, and it was an earth ANSI, if I recall.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, next question is with regards to the ministerial zoning order. Does the HCA have the authority to oppose a ministerial zoning order, or the ability to stop a ministerial zoning order?
Through the chair, to my knowledge, no. It's that ministerial zoning order clears the way for, I'll say, the official plan and zoning. It's a zoning order. But as I understand it, and I was in a session today, there still are municipal and conservation authority requirements that need to be addressed, or that can be addressed through our permitting process. It approves the zoning. It's not it's not a complete clearance of development on the site. It really just clears the way for the zoning, as I understand it.
I want to thank staff for leading us through the consultation. I thought the consultation, in terms of past consultations that Hamilton Conservation Authority has had, this consultation was very comprehensive. And to get 274 roughly responses back, and then 20 some odd emailed responses on a survey that literally asks, I think it was 6 questions. I thought we did very well. So congratulations, Scott and Lisa, in terms of that consultation. I think the recommendation that is before us is a reasonable compromise. Instead of opening up the entire watershed to natural feature offsetting, what our staff is recommending is that we prepare for instances where there's ministerial zoning order, provincial and municipally led environmental assessment projects. I think that is a reasonable approach that most people in the city of Hamilton would understand. Where it gets to allowing offsetting right across the watershed, that's where residents have keenly raised concerns. And so I'm fully supportive of what the staff recommendation is. Like I said, I really appreciate the work that went into the consultation, but also the work that went into drafting this response to us. And most certainly I call it a white paper, but the discussion paper, Scott, that was drafted was very comprehensive and well read by people. So I want to thank staff for their thoroughness, and I fully support the recommendation. Thank you, sir.
By leading by example as the authority, that's a good thing, because we're sticking to our guns. We're saying those natural features should be maintained in place.
Thank you, Chairman Lloyd. I would just like to again add my voice to those who are commending the staff for really a lot of work. Very, very, very technical, very involved. I would also like to thank all the community members who made the time to read through the discussion paper and give us their thoughtful responses. I was impressed at how much response we had. It shows that this issue strikes at the heart, I would venture to say, of what makes us a conservation authority and what people expect from us. I was very interested to see that we had a letter from our former general manager, Ben Vanderbroek, on this, and he made some excellent points, as did many other people. But Ben used the term treasure a few times in his letter, and that kind of resonated with me. I see that people are looking to us to guard that treasure. I support this recommendation. I believe it is both principled and pragmatic. And again, I commend staff for the hard work on a somewhat controversial and certainly highly technical issue. I think everyone has done a terrific job on this. And again, I would thank everybody, including the members of the public who got involved. Thank you.
So having 274 and then the 21 letters, in my mind, that's pretty exemplary.
Okay, thank you. Coming from Puslinch, I wasn't really, sure how to kind of weigh that for the much larger population, but thank you for explaining that. I obviously publicly have spoken very significantly, and I think what you've come up with, Scott, is a very realistic solution to what we're trying to do. And I also was quite touched by the note that we got from Ben Vanderberg. And I thought really one of his closing statements really sums up what I feel. And it was the HCA may well be overruled by provincial and municipal authorities, but nevertheless, the integrity of the HCA as an environmental guardian must remain intact. And I really think that what is coming out of this report is exactly how I feel as a conservation board. We should be reacting. So I thought that was a great comment, and I certainly echo that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I'm going to take I don't think it will surprise you, take a slightly different tact on this. And quite frankly, I was disappointed with the report. On November the 5th, as said right at the start of the report, it says that staff were directed to draft a policy on offsetting. And staff took that direction, went off and drafted a policy. And then it came back to the board later. It came back quite promptly. I was surprised how fast it came back. I got a little bit of glue at an earlier meeting for congratulating Scott on that, but I was surprised how fast he brought it back. And we directed staff then to put it out for public consultation. 3 other conservation authorities have in fact adopted offsetting policy. They include the Credit River, the Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, and the Toronto Conservation Authority. And I tell you what I like about the offsetting policy. And I'm going to reference a lot to 140 Garner Road because, as Scott said earlier tonight, we've only had one. And that was quite a hearing we went through a few months ago. And but it's in the Airport Employment Growth District. This is a large tract of land that the City of Hamilton brought in as employment land, future employment land, and it's coming on stream now. That parcel of land runs from Upper James to just east of the new Highway 6, the Highway 6 South is called, from Garner Road down to the airport. And it does have quite a few ESA areas, of which the property at 140 Garner Road was one with a wetland. But what I like about the offsetting policy is I like the jobs. There were 6,000 jobs. Number 2, I like the tax revenue. And the city's been saying for as long as I've been on council, which is 15 years now, we need to focus on more industrial, commercial, or employment land and commercial development to reduce the tax impact to our taxpayers. I like the fact under the offsetting policy, and Mr. Robichaud touched on this in his comments, and I've heard Scott comment on it, that we would make it as a condition increase in the size of the wetland at the developer's expense. I like the fact from what I saw when I went out to 140 Garner Road is that that particular wetland is infested with invasive species. This would get that cleaned up and have more natural species planted in there. It was badly rutted to the point I fell into a rut, and you can't see them because it's so overgrown, from farm tractors trying to get through it and cutting in or getting stuck. And so this would give us an opportunity to not only clean up the invasive species and plant the right species that we would like to see in our wetlands, but an opportunity to fix that grading issue, then protect it later after the development of the industrial lands or the employment lands take place. We're going through a very painful debate right now at the city on expansion in the urban area boundary. And wetlands, as we saw at 140 Garner Road, don't run nice and neatly down property lines. They go across, in the case of 140 Garner Road, on an angle and make it a lot of the property undevelopable because you can't put a building up that's a warehouse and with all kinds of different shapes to it. They generally have to be squared to allow overhead cranes to run inside, delivery trucks to access and egress. And by following the wetland contours, it'll make a lot of that land undevelopable, which means in the future we'll need more urban boundary expansion because we won't get the yield that we'd like to have got out of those lands in the airport employment growth district. I'm a little concerned about the MZOs that we're suggesting as the solution, because I think it's a red herring. Scott said, and I've heard the same from the Premier when I was at an event, and there was some development there, he was getting questioned on it. He says, remember 3 letters, MZO. But he said, as Scott said tonight, don't put it in unless the municipality agrees. Well, traditionally, my experience of 15 years on council, when it comes to conservation areas, that city staff will reach out to the Conservation Authority for their comments. So we get a request for support to MZO. Staff are going to set it back out to the conservation authorities for their comments, and we're going to be right back in this mess again. Nothing's going to be gained. And so that troubles me, how we're going to manage that. You know, if the city's council decides it's the right thing to do to support an MZO, how can we do that if the conservation authority is going to continue to object? And, you know, we heard the footsteps coming up behind us on all these radical changes that the government brought in for conservation areas. They were sending us a pretty strong message. Your decisions could be appealable now, Central Land Tribunal. We can issue zoning orders. And so I think they were sending a message hoping that we would come around and come more in line with their thinking, right, wrong, or indifferent. I know a lot of you don't agree with that, and I understand why. But we're just going to be right back at square one again if we support the staff recommendation. I didn't read in our Director of Planning's documents that they objected to it. They had, I think, 6 or 7 issues on page 8 and 9 of the Appendix A, I think it's called. And I'll just reference the first 2. It says that first concern was the natural system not being protected by any other applicable federal, provincial, and commercial requirements. Was my concern. And the comment was, staff find this statement unclear. Please provide clarification. And that's really the thrust of what Steve was trying to look for. He was looking for clarification items. All other efforts to protect the natural system being exhausted first in accordance with the mitigation hierarchy. Everybody agrees on that. So I don't see the city chief planner opposing it. I see him saying there's some more information we need to do. I also heard Scott dwell a lot on, well, the official plans don't permit it. Well, I sit in the planning committee for the city of Hamilton, and I can tell you we get official plan amendment requests before us regularly. It's very common to get them in, and we either approve them or reject them. But it's not impossible to change an OP. You just need an official plan amendment application and have it approved by council. And you know, I'm finding that if the upsides and the downsides aren't properly explained to the public, if I went into someone who lived on the 5th floor of a condominium in downtown Hamilton, or a single family home in the mountain, or a townhouse development in Stoney Creek, I said, do you pose an offsetting policy for wetlands? Of course you're going to say no. But you need to have the downside explained to you. You're going to lose jobs. You're going to lose tax revenue. The ministry could order it anyway. And this thing is going to keep coming back to us, particularly in the airport employment growth district. And for full disclosure, that's a lot of it is in my ward. My ward starts at Lancaster. Brenda covers from Lancaster up to Upper James. So I'm very familiar with this area. But I'm having real trouble. I don't think we can do this without staff support, and we don't have it tonight. And as I said in my opening comments, I'm disappointed that. I understand the staff's concerns, and I share some of those concerns, that if we did this, it could have an impact on the HCA's image. And that's the part I'm struggling with, because it's going to take a lot of education and convincing to bring the public around. Because you're right, we had 200 people oppose it. And so I suspect, I see this where it's going to go tonight. I see the board's going to support it. And I probably will also, because I was hoping to get staff on side for this, and they decided not to. So it's going to be difficult. I can tell you that I understand the 140 Garner Road's coming back shortly with an amendment, with a change. So there'll be another application coming in soon. So we're going to be going through the same process all over again. Unless they try to make a move, and I don't know whether they will or won't, to go to the city to request an MZO. The part that the developer really made me angry about at 140 Garner Road, they went in there 3 weeks before harvest and sprayed the entire farm with Roundup and killed all the crops. Garlic, flowers that are being used to be dried and put in flower arrangements. And I even believe there's some horseradish. But I was out there the day after it sprayed and it was all curling up. So I don't have a lot of sympathy for that particular developer. He says I can, I can compensate the farmers, and I had every legal right to do it. And he may be true, but he sure will lose in the court of public opinion for pulling that stunt. So reluctantly, I'll support it tonight, because I just don't think we can go forward without the staff support, because they have to process these things. And with that, I'll take the chair back, Madam Vice Chair.